Hello, everyone. I hope that the following shir will contribute to the meaning that you find in Tisha B'Av. My name is Rachel Slutsky, and I am an educator for Ma'ayan, and I am really honored to have the opportunity to teach this shir titled "The Names of the Wicked Shall Rot: Three Models of Wicked Deterioration." Now, we have a verse in Mishlei in the book of Proverbs in chapter 10, verse 4, which reads that the name of the righteous is invoked in blessing, but the names of the wicked, or the name of the wicked, shall rot. How does a name rot? So in this year, we will examine one sugya from the Bavli, or the Babylonian Talmud, in Tractate Yoma 38b, discussing this term in connection with human suffering, such as the human suffering described in Megillat Eicha, in the scroll of Eicha. And this sugya, to my mind, proposes three different models for what it means to be wicked and what it means in turn for one's wickedness to cause one's name to somehow rot or decay. And each of these models will, of course, raise plenty of questions, some of which we will or will not get to in this short time we have together. But it will raise a variety of questions about justice, and divine retribution. And this will ultimately force us to consider what significance a name truly has, and how one is punished who has not essentially lived up to their name. So without further ado, I'm going to share my screen. Just give me one moment. And there's also a source sheet, which you will, I think, be able to access separate from this as well. But this will, of course, be an easy way to do it. So here we go. Okay. So let us begin, and we're going to start with a verse from Eicha, because this is the verse that is going to be invoked later on, so it's highly relevant for our discussion. The verse is from Eicha chapter 2, verse 20, and it reads, Re'eh Hashem v'habita l'mi olalta ko, im tochalna nashim piryam olale tipuchim, im yehereg b'mikdash Adonai Kohen v'navi. See, O Lord, and behold to whom you have done this. Alas, women eat their own fruit, their newborn babes. Alas, slain in the sanctuary of the Lord, our priest and prophet. So this is a really heart-rending image of total destruction and also human depravity that is caused by this destruction. So women doing kind of the most unmotherly, inhumane act of eating their own children, because all has been kind of lost to chaos, right? Slain in the very sanctuary, our priest and prophet. So these forms of kind of divinely inspired leadership, they are being ruined and destroyed, Dafka in the sanctuary. So let's look at source 2, and this is our sugya from Yoma. Hugras ben Levi v'chule. Tanya, כשהוא נותן קולו בנעימה, מכניס גודלו לתוך פיו ומניח אצבעו בין הנימין, עד שהיו אחיו הכהנים נזכרים בבת ראש לאחוריהם. Okay, so we start with this odd statement about a man named Hugras ben Levi. Okay, so it was taught in a Breita that when Hugras ben Levi projects his voice in a sweet melody, okay, so he makes beautiful music, the way he does this is he places his thumb into his mouth and places his finger between the strings of a lyre until his brethren, the priests, the Kohanim, are abruptly taken aback. Okay, so in other words, Hugras ben Levi has this astonishing talent / skill where he can create beautiful melodies, somehow connected to both how he uses his fingers in his mouth and also with his instrument. Okay, whether we can recreate that or not is a different question, but we clearly have almost instructions for how one could make this sound. Okay. Tanu Rabbanan, Ben Kamsar lo ratza lelamed al maaseh haktav. So let's switch gears for a minute and think about this, because now we have Hugras ben Levi in the back of our minds, and now seemingly a totally disconnected short story. So the sages taught that this man Ben Kamsar did not want to teach others a special technique of writing. Amru alav shehaya notel arba'a kulmosin ben etzba'otav, ve'im hayta teva shel arba otiot, haya kotva bevat achat. Amru ma ra'ita shelo lelamed. Kulan matzut shuva ledivrehem, ben Kamsar lo matzat shuva lidvarav. Al harishonim ne'emar, zecher tzadik livracha, ve'al ben Kamsar v'chaverav ne'emar, v'shem risha'im yirkav. Okay, so we have Ben Kamsar who doesn't want to share his special technique for writing. They said, what was the special thing he would do, for which they don't know the technique? They said about him that he would take 4 quills between all his different fingers, and if there was a word consisting of 4 letters that he wanted to write, he could write it simultaneously. Okay. So there's a lot to pick up on here we won't get into, but there's a parallelism also, right? That all the heads of the priests in the case of Hugras ben Levi, they turn around suddenly. It says bevat rosh, okay, in amazement. And here we have bevat echat, kind of in one stroke at one time simultaneously. We have everyone, we have all the fingers essentially of Ben Kamsar being able to write their own letter simultaneously. So the people said to them, the sages asked them, what did you see that led you not to teach that technique? Okay, so, right, we see how you do this very cool thing, but none of us know the logic behind it. And everyone found an answer to their words, which I think means, and I think you could interpret this in multiple ways, right, that other people were able to say he must not have explained it because of this reason or that reason. But Ben Kamsar himself doesn't come up with a response to their words. So he doesn't teach his skill, which Hugras seems to, right? Because it seems to be known in the Breita of how you make a beautiful melody. And, right, Ben Kamsar can't even explain why he's going to have this special knowledge and keep it all to himself. With regard to the first people listed, it is stated, okay, so with regard to the people who can explain, right, why one would keep this to themselves, who can at least justify that decision, the memory of the righteous shall be for a blessing. That first half of that verse from Mishlei, okay, zecher tzadik livracha. Right, so they will be blessed. That they're fine, they're in good stead. But about Ben Kamsar and people like him, his counterparts, it is stated the latter part of that verse, okay, Vishem Risha'im Yerkav, but the name of the wicked shall rot. So Ben Kamsar, I think, is our first model for someone who is wicked and whose name rots. And I think the way to understand Ben Kamsar, or one of the ways to do that, is to think this is someone who's wicked, again, not in maybe a traditional sense. He's not blatantly evil and goes and kills innocent people. No, but he keeps his knowledge, his skills, his talents to himself. So he doesn't share learning with the world. And that could be okay if he had a reason for it. But this is an unreasonable decision. This is a selfish decision, right? This is an unjustifiable decision. And those things make someone, in a sense, wicked. And what does it mean that they're wicked and their name rots? Here, I think we have actually somewhat of a kind of naturalistic way of interpreting this. Their name rots in the sense that if you don't pass on things for people to know you by and any key to access their knowledge, right? You have this amazing skill of writing 4 letters simultaneously with one hand. Okay, and people know you for that, but you're never able to kind of pass on that knowledge and teach someone else. Your name will naturally rot, right? You won't stay in living memory of those who come after you because you've given them nothing on which to hold, nothing on which to truly remember you by and imitate you. So this is our first model. Let's keep going. My Vishem Risha'im Yirkav, Amar Rabbi Elazar, and sorry, with these red lines everywhere, I myself sometimes can't read all the Nikudot, but bear with me. Rikabi vut ta'ale bishmotan, shelo miskinin bishmayu. So regarding that latter half of the verse, we're coming back to this, what does it mean for a name to rot? So Rabbi Elazar says, well, it means kind of what it sounds like. Decay will spread on their names, meaning we don't call people by these names, by their names. Okay. So in other words, the name will decay in the sense that it gets no use because you want to name people after tzaddikim. You don't want to name them after terrible people. And therefore, they won't be remembered. The names will fall out of use. Okay. Metiv Ravina. Ravina objects. And here, again, for brevity's sake, my reading of this is Ravina doesn't object to this practice, right? He objects to this kind of statement about how things are, right? That Rabbi Elazar said, people don't use the name of the wicked. And Ravina, I think, agrees in the sense that maybe one shouldn't, but disagrees in the claim that one doesn't. So Ravina says, wait a minute, I have a story for you that proves that someone did keep alive the name of a wicked person. But he doesn't disagree that that's a problem. And we'll see why. Here's the story. Ma'aseh b'doeg ben Yosef, shehinicho aviv ben katan le'imo. So there was an incident involving someone named Doeg ben Yosef, whose father died and left him as a young child to his mother. Okay. B'chol yom hayta imo modidato bitfachim v'notenet mishkalo shel zahav levet hamikdash. So each day, his mother measured his height, right, the child's height, and his hand breadths, right? So again, measuring kind of each way all of his dimensions, right? The measurement, what's the word? The standard of measurement, right, being tfachim, and donated a measure of gold equivalent to his weight to the temple. Ukshagavar oyev Tavachatu, sorry, with the lines, it's hard to see, my own fault. Tavachatu ve'achaltu. So when the enemy prevailed, she slaughtered him and ate him. Okay, very disturbing story. What is going on? Okay. So let us just back up for 1 second about who is this fellow Doeg. So we won't go kind of too off script here, but suffice it to say that Doeg is not a great guy. So you might be familiar with a story in 1 Samuel in which Doeg basically is responsible for the mass slaughter of many righteous people in the city of Nov, Ir HaKohanim. So there's a city of priests, right? And Doeg is essentially responsible for this mass murder. That's kind of the very short version. So now there's this innocent child. We know nothing about him, just that he's named after Doeg. Okay, so very bizarre. And he meets a very sticky, sad end. So his own mother, who seems to love him so much, right? And actually seems not only to love him, but to do something very righteous, right? She donates seemingly a significant amount of gold, presumably, right? His own weight in gold to the Mikdash, right? Every single day. And ultimately, when the enemy prevailed, when the Mikdash was destroyed, she slaughtered and ate him. Now, parenthetically, I suppose we don't actually know when this story is supposed to be set. So, kind of which enemy in particular, which destruction. But those specifics are not important here. Perhaps it's the destruction of the first temple. Okay. And now here we have the Aleha Konen Yirmiyahu. And it's regarding her that Yirmiyahu says the following, which is our verse in Eicha. Im tochalna nashim per yam olale tipuchim. Shall the women eat their fruit, their children in their care? And it uses this word tipuchim, which sounds quite similar to tfachim, that standard of measurement. Okay, so again, this other connection to this story and Eicha is that this mother had measured her son, right? And the measurement, the term for that is a play on words with tipuchim, okay, of children. Meshiva ruach hakodesh ve'omeret, im yahareg b'mikdash Hashem Kohen v'navi, chazi maislek be. The divine spirit responds and says, right, another in the same verse from Lamentations, from Eicha, shall the priest and the prophet be slain in the temple of the Lord? And the Gemara responds, see what befell him. Now, there's an insertion, this translation I have to add before we start to wrap up. There's an insertion at the end here, which is, this is really the translation and interpretation here of Rabbi Adin Steinsaltz, Zichrono Livracha. And here, there's this added point that this has to do with a murder of a righteous priest, Zechariah ben Yehoiada, okay? But also, taking that aside, right, the Gemara's response, Chazi my slake bay, right, see what befell him, seems to also go quite nicely with the story of Doeg, right? So see what befell this innocent boy, right? Ultimately, he is destroyed. So here I think we have another model of what it means to be wicked and what it means for a name to rot. So this is our second model. Here, I think the wicked one is the one who's most absent from the story, which seems to be this father of Doeg, right? Not necessarily the father, but those who named him. So presumably the father. Okay, so these parents who seemingly love their child very much, but they have chosen to give him the name of someone who is infamous. Doeg is terrible. He's known for doing something terrible. They love their child very much. They seem very righteous and committed to the Beit HaMikdash. And ultimately, total chaos, human depravity, the ultimate suffering happens. The enemy comes on, is destroying the temple, is ransacking Jerusalem. And this mother who adores her child so much eats him. And in eating him, in a sense, right, it almost proves again, the name will rot, in the sense that there seems to be kind of imminent destruction, right? So we could say almost something superstitious in nature about this understanding of what it means for a name to rot. Okay, so in other words, if you continue to pass on the name of someone wicked, you might be endangering their lives, that actually something really bad could happen to them because that name and the memory and the person with whom it's originally associated is not supposed to live on. Then we have our third example, this time less seemingly of a person who's wicked, but a definition of what it means for their name to rot, which will also help tell us about another model of a wicked person. This is in the last box. Amar Rabbi Elazar, Sadik me'atzmo v'rasha mechavero. Sadik me'atzmo dichtiv, zecher tzadik livracha, v'rasha mechavero dichtiv, v'shem rishayim yirkav. So Rabbi Elazar said, a righteous person is praised for his own actions, and a wicked person is cursed for the actions of his wicked counterpart. Okay, now just to remind ourselves, we saw Rabbi Elazar earlier on, right, who had said this statement about basically people don't name other people after the evil people who came before. So now he seems to have slightly recanted because, okay, Ravina had a good objection that I have at least one powerful story where someone did name their child after a Russia. So Rabbi Elazar now has a new interpretation, which is a righteous person seems to be rewarded or praised for their own actions. And this seems to be derived from this verse that we keep coming back to in Mishlei and Proverbs that says, Zecher tzadik livracha, the memory of a righteous person. And notice tzadik here is in singular, not tzadikim, is for a blessing. Okay, so on one's own merits, one's own righteousness, you will be praised. But a Russia is punished in a sense doubly so, both for one's own evil doing and the evil doing of someone else. Okay, and again, this point is proven by that same verse where we see the word Rishaim in plural. The name, the Shem Rishaim Yirkav. So the name of the wicked shall rot. And actually, it's more than that. It's Shem, which is singular. So we have this kind of collective name of multiple wicked people, this grouping together. Now, this raises all sorts of questions. All three of these raise a great many questions about what does it mean to be punished? Are these punishments in a sense fair? Right? I mean, Doeg is this innocent child who's killed. A wicked person being punished for the crimes not only of himself, but of other people. Is that fair? Right? Our first example in the beginning about someone who doesn't teach others how to write 4 letters simultaneously, his name will rot. Is that fair or reasonable? We have this massive question on the face of all of those things. I think we would say they're not fair. I'd like to believe that at least this sugya is not necessarily about fairness. I think we might posit that these are different understandings of perhaps the way that God works, whether those appeal to our readings in modernity or not, is a different question. And these don't have to kind of appeal to your sense of justice. I think there is something that's deeper here, though, that's quite interesting, which is about as we go into Tisha B'Av to think about our own behavior. To think about, do we share knowledge with others, right? So that not only, self-servingly, so our name will be carried on, but so that we have merited that, right? That we have something to share that would improve people's lives. Have we made sure that we are teaching our children, raising our children, naming our children, right? After people who are wise, who were kind, who were tzaddikim? Or are we somehow, right, intimating to them, if you name your child Doeg, it's a little like naming your child Hitler, right? You set them up for a very complicated existence. And finally, I think that there might be this aspect in the latter portion of this about a wicked person who essentially pays for the crimes of other wicked people as well, right? That I think it's not simply kind of this metaphysical one is kind of extra punished, but that could be what the rabbis are implying. But I think it also appeals to kind of this sensibility that you want to kind of merit things on your own. And for this final part of the sugya that talks about the wicked person being cursed for actions of others, right? You can get involved in things that you kind of never thought they'd spin out of control. But before you know it, you're part of a whole group of people who have all done something terrible. And it's hard to differentiate what was your role and what was someone else's. So I think there's both kind of this metaphysical, very spiritual way to understand all of these 3 cases. And at the same time, I think there's something that's very kind of observational about the way the world works in this sugya. That's matter of fact. Don't expect to be treated fairly when you do wrong. Don't expect that everything will be fine if you've taught your child and raised your child kind of under the aura of someone who was reputed to be terrible. And don't expect that if you save all your knowledge for yourself and you can't even give an explanation for why you wouldn't share kind of good skills, helpful things with others, that ultimately your name will die out. So I hope that learning this again, this brief shear, has been enlightening and has exposed you to perhaps some new ideas and some either familiar or new texts, and that this can help us think more about our own actions, how we can strive to be more righteous people, um, and about the things that might be at stake for us when we behave poorly. I will stop my screen share now. Thank you so much for learning with me. Have an easy fast and a meaningful Tisha B'Av.